Tonight, for the first time, President Biden signing an executive order restricting access at the southern border. The president announcing his strongest immigration action yet. But will it work, and is it even legal? Here's the president today.
Republicans have left me no choice. Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. This action will help us gain control of our border, restore order into the process. We must face the simple truth. To protect America as a land that welcomes immigrants, we must first secure the border and secure it now.
So here's what the order will do. Once illegal crossings surpass 2,500, as you see right here, it will bar migrants from requesting asylum. The restrictions will last until they dip below 1,500 per day. And right now, the daily average of encounters is around 4,000, which means this order will go into effect immediately. And a reminder, the border spans nearly 2,000 miles from Southern California all the way to Texas, which means the order will impact more than 300 points of entry. So there are questions tonight on whether the U.S. even has the manpower to make this a reality. Biden's executive order signals a massive shift in his political stance on immigration. The move, something he sharply criticized on the debate stage before becoming president.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come. And those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard. This is the first president in the history of the United States of America that anybody seeking asylum has to do it in another country. That's never happened before in America.
So why the massive change? Well, here's one potential reason. Immigration is top of mind for voters. Faced with a slew of issues, the situation at the border coming in at just number 2 behind inflation, according to our most recent NBC News poll. And it's a big issue, especially in an election year. This NBC News poll finding 69% say they disapprove of how Biden has handled the border. Biden seemingly determined to tackle his major political weakness against former President Trump with just 5 months until the November election, leaving some wondering, is there even enough time? His opponent, former President Trump, saying this about the new executive order.
He could have done it very easily. All he had to do is say, close the border. That's the power of the presidency.
Now, the courts haven't always agreed with that point and didn't when President Trump tried it. And also keep in mind the bipartisan border bill failed twice as Republicans, at the request of Trump, rejected it. Today's move comes after a record nearly 10 million migrants have crossed into the U.S. since President Biden took office. Though the number of monthly border encounters has sharply decreased from reaching record highs back in December, we should point out. It's not just the U.S. working to handle the immigration crisis. Panama's president saying he will shut down one of the world's busiest immigration routes, the Darien Gap, and now Mexico working on the other side of the border through interdiction efforts as well. This morning, NBC News spoke with a Venezuelan family who came through a port of entry seeking asylum, saying they slept on the streets in Mexico while waiting.
How long were you waiting? 7 months and 6 days, he tells us, saying he came to the U.S. to work to feed his young family.
That was Julia Ainsley, who's at the border. It's because of stories like that that the ACLU is now suing the Biden administration. That's right, the same ACLU that took on the Trump administration for its immigration policies. Everything from child separation to policies similar to what President Biden is now doing. So what does the ACLU think about this new executive order and the major change coming from Joe Biden? Joining us now is Lee Gelernt. He's deputy director of the Immigrants' Rights Project with the ACLU. He led some of the biggest lawsuits against the Trump administration. Lee, we thank you so much for joining Top Story tonight. You've been the face of the ACLU when it comes to the immigration crisis, both under the Trump administration and now under the Biden administration. Talk to me about why the ACLU is now suing the Biden administration.
Yeah, so we sued under Trump, and we have to sue under Biden. They've left us no choice. The policy from our vantage point is legally the same as what President Trump did. And so we successfully sued under Trump, and so we think we're going to have to sue under Biden. We will bring that suit, timing to be determined. And let me explain why we think it's illegal. So it's basically that the executive can't do this without Congress. Congress has very clearly said you may apply for asylum regardless of where you enter. And the reason is very clear. Sometimes people can't get to a port because it's hundreds of miles away. They're with a little child. Sometimes cartels are pushing you through at different places. Sometimes they just don't know where the port is. So what Congress said is, if you're genuinely in danger, just get to U.S. soil and we'll screen you. And I want to be very clear about a few things. We are not saying everyone's entitled to asylum, but we are saying you're entitled to a screening, and that's a solemn promise we made after World War II. This would not even give people a screening on asylum. And I know in your intro, you talked about the American public, and I think that's right. But I think there's a misconception about what the American public wants. I think they want something balanced and in the middle. They don't want something like shutting off asylum completely. If you said to people, look, there's a family and they're being persecuted because of their religion, because they're Christian, because whatever, and they're going to be in serious danger, maybe deadly danger, would you want them to have a screening for asylum? I think most people would say yes, but they also want it to be streamlined so people are not spending years waiting for asylum and there's chaos at the border. We are all in favor of streamlining the process, but we don't want to see President Biden go to the other end that Trump did and say we're going to ban asylum completely.
I want to play a little bit more of what President Biden said today and get your take on the other end. Let's play that.
Today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own to address the border. Frankly, I would have preferred to address this issue through bipartisan legislation because that's the only way to actually get the kind of system we have now that's broken, fixed.
So, Lee, you just mentioned this, right? He needs Congress. He tried. He says he tried. He couldn't get anywhere with the Republicans. He's left with no other options.
Well, so it's right that Congress didn't want to take it up, and that's been a problem for years. But what I think President Biden had is other options than completely shutting off asylum. What we would have liked to have seen is surging resources to the border and try that, because I think, as you know, and been to the border many, many times, families are not actually trying to evade border agents. They walk across the border, they sit down, waiting for an officer to come up and say, when is my time to apply for asylum, and be screened. So we don't need more enforcement officers. What we need are more asylum officers to screen people, to move it quickly. We get that the American public wants the asylum system to work more efficiently, to move it so there's not chaos. That takes more asylum officers. We think the president could have sent more asylum officers there, but more importantly, we think Congress needs to allocate even more resources to send asylum officers. I think that's the way to do it. And I think, as your reporting has shown over the years, when people are that desperate, they're going to leave their countries no matter what. And so the only way is, I also think that ultimately we need more legal pathways for people who want to work, because there are no legal pathways. I don't know a single economist now who's saying we don't need more workers in the U.S. and more immigrant workers. If we opened up all these legal pathways, people wouldn't be so desperate to line up at the border, and then we would have shorter lines for asylum for people who genuinely need it, and we would have people coming in through legal pathways to work, and that would be a benefit to our country. I think what the other side has done is so polarized at making people think all these families are here to do harm. They are not here to do harm. Think about the immigrants you know. They are not fitting that narrative.
And I want to ask you about that. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been trying to push for those worker programs here in this city as well. But I do want to go back to what President Biden said as a candidate and what he's doing today, now, in 2024, right before this election. Do you feel duped?
You know, look, the reality is a lot of things play into these situations.
You think it's politics?
I would say we are disappointed that the administration has taken this road, because we think the policies are misguided. I think probably politics plays into every decision every White House makes. You know, and I don't want to focus on that completely. I'm hoping that we can convince the administration, if not the courts, that this is misguided and illegal, and maybe the administration can pull it back or mitigate it. I think that the Biden administration needs to hear from people and saying, yeah, we've named immigration as a big issue for us, but that's not how we wanted to go. We didn't want to go to an extreme Trump policy. We want something in the middle. There's still time for the Biden administration to mitigate it if it wants to.
Lee, let me ask you something, because I have covered the border for years. It's where I first met you, was down on the border during child separation. And I have noticed a difference, though, when you talk to migrants, and I'm able to talk to migrants, right, because I speak Spanish.
Right.
And I'm very sensitive to this issue, because I am the son of Cuban refugees The difference I noticed is that when you talk to migrants years ago, they would give you a variety of reasons of why they're coming over. Now, when I survey migrants, and it's a lot of it are Venezuelan, and trust me, I've been in Venezuela. They have serious issues there, and they should ask for asylum because of what I've seen in Venezuela. That being said, they all seek asylum. This family's coming from Venezuela. They said they can't work, they can't eat, they're seeking asylum. If everyone's seeking asylum, doesn't that hurt your argument and what the ACLU is trying to do in saying that we need to give asylum? But if everyone's asking for asylum, is President Biden's hands not tied?
So that's a fair point, and this is what I would say about two things. One is, if you have people who want to work and they see no other path than to apply for asylum, that's a problem with how we've designed our immigration system. Let's have legal pathways for people to work. But the other thing I would say is, you're right, not everyone has an asylum claim, but we still need screenings, because for the people we send back to real danger who really have asylum claims, it's no solace to them to say, well, lots of other people didn't have asylum, so we're going to send you back to torture or death. So we need a proper screening system, and you're absolutely right. It has to be more efficient, but we can't say because lots of people won't win, we're going to send everyone back.
From your history filing these lawsuits, explain to our viewers what happens next, right? So this executive order takes effect immediately, but it's going to be stopped pretty quickly by the courts, possibly.
Well,
if they rule like they ruled under the Trump administration, and I know the orders are a little different.
Right. Well, I mean, we're hopeful. We have to figure out the timing of the lawsuit. We haven't filed yet. We just got the rule today. We're going to go through it carefully and decide the timing of the lawsuit and where we're going to file it. And then we hope to get quick action by the courts in joining it. I think President Biden and his team have acknowledged that there are real doubts about the legality of it. I think they were expecting a lawsuit. We'll see. I think they tried to.
Nothing's going to prevent you from filing that lawsuit.
Unless the Biden administration pulls back, we see that we're going to have.
You're going forward with the lawsuit.
I mean, we have no choice, we think, unless the Biden administration pulls back.
Where are you filing, in California or New York?
So we haven't decided yet. I mean, the options are anywhere from California to D.C. We haven't decided timing, but I will certainly keep you posted on that.
And then, do you think this is even possible, knowing the manpower issues at the border? If this were to go into effect, and say you lose in court, and the executive order is the law of the land, will border officials, will this actually work? Is this feasible?
So I don't think it will work in the sense that people won't still come to the border because they're so desperate. It's not as if they're going to hear about this policy and say, well, let's just take our chances with danger in our country. So they're still going to come. What I think is so troubling about this policy that hasn't got enough attention is I'm not sure how much resources it's going to take, because under normal policies, you have to affirmatively ask people, will you be tortured? Will something happen to you? And so then they'll get a screening, and that takes resources to implement. What the Biden administration is doing, which is really draconian, is saying, unless you affirmatively, the migrant, ask to be screened, you're going to get no screening. So they won't need asylum officers there. They're just going to push you back across the border. And so we're very worried that everyone's going to get pushed back across the border without any asylum officers ever seeing them.
And here's the reality, right? If you're a Mexican immigrant, you'll go back to Mexico. But if you're Venezuelan, if you're from Africa, if you're from Asia, there's no saying these countries are going to take you back.
Right. And so the Biden administration is saying they're going to put you in Mexico, and I guess they've gotten some agreement from Mexico, and people don't know where to go in Mexico. It's very dangerous for migrants.
The U.S. couldn't even house all those migrants. We've been there, right? And now they're going to try to do this in Mexico.
They're going to be sleeping in the streets. They're going to be subject to cartels. It's going to be really a nightmare.
I want to put up something else that's sort of curious. This is from earlier today, on the same day Biden announced his order. This is an interview with Time magazine. I want to put it up for our viewers here. It was published. In it, Time writes, Biden says his only regret about lifting Trump's anti-immigration measures is that he didn't do it sooner. His goal in a second term, he says, is to finish what he started. Isn't that a complete reversal of what we're seeing today?
Yeah, I mean, I am not one of those people that would say Biden is Trump, on family separation.
And we're not saying that.
Right. But this is extremely disappointing. He did promise that he would have a humane asylum system. This is not a humane asylum system.
Where do you think the next step is here? Do you think that you're successful in your lawsuit, or do you think the executive order is pushed through?
I think they're not looking to pull back the executive order. I think this has been in the works for a while, and they've made a decision they're going to do it. I think at this point, we probably have to rely on the courts, and we'll see what happens. I would never will say we're definitely going to win or lose, just being the cautious lawyer. But I will give it our best. I think there's too much at stake here. I think we are really in a sea change in America now. No asylum system, and we're diverging from the rest of the world. I mean, we said after World War II, we would at least screen people before we send them back to danger.
But what is, I know we're running out of time here, but what's the solution? 10 million since he took office. Clearly there's a crisis. I mean, we have to have laws. We have to have borders. I know you're on the front lines of fighting for immigrants for the right reasons, but what is the solution?
So I think two things. One is we need more legal pathways for workers. That's one thing, so that everyone doesn't have to line up at the border. They come in and they contribute to the economy, and the employers want it. And the second thing is we need to put more asylum officers at the border to do the screenings. We have the resources to screen them. There is already a law in place that allows the screenings to happen very quickly. We need to do that rather than stopping the screenings. We don't need more enforcement agents because these families are not trying to escape. They are trying to apply for asylum. So I think those are the solutions we need to try.
Lee Gelernt from the ACLU, we thank you for coming on tonight to explain what you guys plan on doing, and we hope to keep talking to you throughout this process.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Tom.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.